Hello, and you are welcome to this week's episode of Indo Politics. I'm Tabitha Monahan, and this week I'm joined in studio by my colleague in the politics team, Cónal Thomas. Plenty for us to be talking about this week in relation to a big poll that came out this week. There was a motion of confidence in the Taoiseach, a Fianna Fáil's internal review into what happened with Jim Gavin. So I think we'll start with the poll because it was quite significant.
Yeah, so this would have been the first poll that has been done since Jim Gavin's kind of been fully out of the race. The first one would have been still in, then he dropped out. The Red Sea one was that he was half in, half out when they were polling. This one fully out, but I mean, look, the numbers are quite stark. 38% for Catherine Connolly, 20% for Heather Humphreys, that's a gulf, and 5% just for Jim Gavin. And then there's still about 18% of people undecided. Now that's a good bit lower than it previously was, 27, then 24, now 18. Look,
which is normal as we get closer to polling day.
Sure, but the mood today, particularly just talking to people up in Leinster House, was very much, you know, it's all over. Now, it's not over till it's over, and both camps today, Connolly and Humphreys, would be saying that as well. You know, we're, 7-8 days out now from polling, but I mean, like, it's pretty clear. And like the narrative really now is, what can Heather Humphreys do to turn this around, if anything? But it's a mountain to climb. It
is. When your opponent is almost double the numbers that you are in the last poll before the poll of all polls then next Friday. It is, I would imagine, quite worrying. And of course Heather Humphreys is going to come out and say, well, I don't look at the polls, I don't look at them. And Catherine Connolly was saying the same thing as well. Everybody looks at the polls. We all look at the polls. We all know their teams are looking at the polls. 5% for Jim Gavin has gone down a lot. I wonder whether or not closer to polling day will that go down even further, because people will have had time to think about it.
Yeah, and I mean, there was some interesting commentary today around whether people actually realise Jim Gavin's gone from the race, or whether they don't, or whether they even care. The question over all of this, I suppose, the last couple of weeks has been, where do those Fianna Fáil votes go? Right, and what the data showed today in the poll was that they're kind of split pretty evenly between Catherine Connolly and Heather Humphreys.
Which is bad news for Heather Humphreys. Bad news, and a big blow, because that's what they really would have been counting on. It's really hard at this point to see Heather Humphreys catching up, but as I say, there's 7 or 8 days left. That ground war and that ground game's going to count for everything. But I mean, you've been out yourself on the campaign trail now with Heather Humphreys a good bit, and what's your sense of it at the moment? It's a really hard one to judge, because I remember going on a canvass with Simon Harris in the general election last year, and it was Catherine Monahan, which was Heather Humphreys' constituency, and she went along, and I was really surprised that, okay, the Taoiseach at the time, he was trying to shake everybody's hands. We know it was new energy, Fine Gael, I want to meet everybody across the country, and that was the energy he was giving. But people were crossing the road to see Heather Humphreys. There was so much good attitudes towards her. They were really positive. They wanted to thank her for everything that she has done, because she was about to step down from politics. I thought, wow, that was really interesting, because I'd never seen her kind of in her own patch, see her with the, her voters. So I was expecting that to translate then this time around. And we know Fine Gael, she's so well liked within Fine Gael. Yeah. And I think when Mairead McGuinness had to step aside and Heather Humphreys took over, I think there was a huge amount of positivity around that. I don't know if that's translating. And of course we see the polls the way that they are. Yeah. And even when we look at the earliest one, we had obviously the Indo poll, then we had the Business Post, and now we have the Irish Times. It's just getting worse and worse and worse for Heather as it's going on. And I'm not seeing that personable Heather Humphreys, who's kind of the down-to-earth former credit union manager. I'm not seeing that translate on the campaign trail, and also we're not seeing it reflected in the polls. When you look at, let's say, how Catherine Connolly's getting on, and I was talking to our colleague Maeve McTaggart, who's been following Catherine Connolly, and she said, like, there's been moments when, she went to Maynooth during the week, that they almost had to do this makeshift security situation. Such was the interest in people trying to see Catherine Connolly taking selfies. And it's not the usual student kind of SU, I'm from a politics sock or anything like that. It's just everyday students who are just really interested, and I think have been captured by the campaign that's really been played out on social media.
Yeah, and the important thing for Catherine Connolly, whether they show up. I mean, like, Heather Humphreys has had a pretty torrid day. I mean, we've seen proceedings in the court now from Paul Murphy over comments she made last week during a debate in which she then doubled down on at the end of the debate, and today she effectively
Did the same again.
Yeah. But it's interesting the point you're making around the buoyancy around Heather Humphreys at the start, because when Mairead pulled back and had to pull out Mairead McGuinness, there was that sense that there was actually, I remember talking to a number of Fine Gael TDs, and they were saying, this is better.
Yeah.
This is better. And what I think the conclusion at the moment, I don't want to make too many conclusions. I think we need to just be careful on this because, I say we're still a week out, but the sense I think we're all getting a little bit, the narrative, is that perhaps Heather Humphreys is not that consequential a politician.
Yeah.
When she was in government, there's very little that you can recall that you would have put her name to. She's obviously put forward around the pandemic,
hot school meals,
the decade of centenaries, etc. She's been criticised Sinn Féin over that repeatedly. But anyway, she wasn't out in the media that much during her time in government. And I think this is coming to bear now. And what we're seeing today, we heard on the debate today on the News at 1, is the same kind of talking points over and over again. And you're probably seeing that a little bit play out on the campaign trail. But if those talking points, I think, and that narrative that she's putting out there of this sort of folksy and whimsy, if it's not washing with people over the airwaves, it's certainly not going to wash with people on the ground.
Do you think there's time for them to change tack, though, at this stage? It's quite late.
I don't know what more they can do, because they've not, Fine Gael have seen where the attack dog style has kind of backfired on them, because every time Catherine Connolly has been able to come out, and you may be listening sometimes to Catherine Connolly and thinking, I don't agree with that at all, or no, that's bananas, but at least she has the strength of her convictions to explain it, and often doubles down on it. She'll double down on
she
nearly
sticks to a point and she
every
continues.
single thing, and it seems to be working for her. The attack stuff isn't working for Fine Gael. I don't think it ever really has. I think Fine Gael have done this. They did it a bit during the general election. It's not working for them now. This smear the bejesus out of them, out of her advice from Ivan Yates, has completely backfired to the point where Heather Humphreys has had to repeatedly distance herself from that.
And other ministers too.
Look, talking to both sides of the kind of campaign today, behind the scenes, the sense is from the Connolly camp, they're still hitting the road. There's going to be a big gig for Catherine in Vicar Street on Monday. I'm told that 1,500 tickets sold out within half an hour today for that. They're not changing tack. They don't feel they need to change strategy. They don't feel they need to change direction. Funnily enough, neither do Fine Gael.
I just don't understand
It
that.
seems
I really
to be,
don't get that.
Let's keep going, keep the positive message, keep driving Heather Humphreys forward as this centrist, reliable, wants to go on trade missions, etc. And I just don't, we can see it in the poll numbers. It's not working.
Again, with the trade missions thing, do the public want that of their president? I think, and you actually made the point when we were in the studio the last time, and you said that Michael D. Higgins has very much framed what people expect the presidency to be now, to be outspoken on Gaza, on housing, etc. And I think Heather Humphreys is trying to chart her own path here, in the same way that Michael D. was very much made the arts part of his presidency, and we saw that quite a lot over the last 14 years. They're trying to pivot into this trade thing. I don't know if that translates. I think people see that as a government role.
And I think part of the reasoning behind it, I think they think they're being clever here in a way, is because so much of the political debate and the kind of the political risk in many ways has been around the trade issue and Trump and tariffs for the majority of this government's term. And I think Fine Gael, having led out on that, are kind of thinking, well, this must be something that resonates with the public. It's like, it doesn't. It only resonates with the public if they think there's risk to an economic shock. Yeah. It doesn't resonate with the public. They think the president's going to go and try and win investment from Canada.
Which they can't, but also can't do anyway.
It's the government. I was actually looking this up and I was thinking, Mary McAleese did a number, but it's been since then that this idea of presidential trade missions or president going on trade missions has come about. And I mean, it's obviously something they're going to continue hammering home as this sort of, reliable, it's all about investment, but this is the presidential election.
Yeah.
I mean, do people really want that? The other thing, in all of this, and this is where the Fianna Fáil vote comes into it, is, where are they going to go? What are those TDs and ministers going to be telling their supporters now with Jim Gavin out of the running? And the sense I'm picking up a little bit from the Fianna Fáil camp is, I'm not getting involved. I don't care.
But it's difficult for them to recommend.
Absolutely.
Please vote for a Fine Gaeler.
But people will be asking, and people will be asking them, well, what way should it go? But ultimately, if the message coming from some TDs is effectively, don't ask me. Well, then those people...
It's almost apathy.
It's apathy, and it could be past 10. People might just stay at home.
Yeah. Talk to me about Bertie Ahern coming in behind Heather Humphreys. What do we think of that?
Yeah, Bertie on News Talk this morning saying that he'd back Heather Humphreys. Interesting, I think he said in the absence of either Jim Gavin or himself. He's
still holding on to
holding hope. And look, he had another pop at the party, and he had another pop at Micheál Martin, and not a pop, but he was asked effectively, were you disappointed, Micheál Martin? And he said, yeah, I was a bit. And he kind of repeated this line, I think he did when to supporters the night he kind of formally withdrew a few weeks back, where it was, the party had between Christmas and Easter to let me know if they didn't want me to, and they didn't, and then I could have thought about the independent route and all of this. He's 74 now. He said effectively, I thought this would be my shot. It wasn't to be. That's it. Let's draw a line under it, and let's maybe all just draw a line under it for now.
The only other thing that I noticed from Bertie Ahern's comments was that he didn't exactly go against Catherine Connolly either. While he did back Heather Humphreys and say she will be the person I will vote for, he didn't exactly slate Catherine Connolly, which I think would have been possibly as beneficial to Heather Humphreys, if not more, if he did so. But he didn't.
Well, it could have been. I mean, ultimately, the counter argument in all of this is whether the Ahern brand is still seen by many people as it is as kind of toxic, right? But if Bertie Ahern was to come out and bash Catherine Connolly and go full tilt for Heather Humphreys, there's a lot of people, maybe who haven't made up their mind, that might go, actually, do you know what? I'm not sure I agree with him, and I'm going to go with the candidate he wants, because he is this figure, and he has this. People have a visceral reaction to anything Bertie Ahern says sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, look again, just in what he's saying about not bashing Catherine Connolly. Maybe that feeds in a little bit to some people in Fianna Fáil, maybe not sure themselves. And I think people will be looking at that poll this morning going, if the public mood is going one way, maybe I should follow it.
Absolutely. Another thing I wanted to ask you about or talk about is the kind of friction within some of the left parties that are backing Catherine Connolly. We saw some in the Green Party saying that they weren't happy. We obviously had Alan Kelly out saying that he wasn't going to be voting for Catherine Connolly. To me, that was somewhat obvious. I think we knew that was going to happen. He was never really going to vote for Catherine Connolly. He did say that he was going to vote for Heather Humphreys instead. Are we seeing kind of, the left starting to do what the left does here, or not really? I think they've actually stuck together here, and very successfully so.
I think so. I'm not reading too much into it. I mean, yeah, we knew Alan Kelly. He's been on the record for a few weeks or more now saying he wouldn't be voting for, he didn't want the party, didn't think the party should back Catherine Connolly, and he's going to reluctantly, I think is the word he used, vote for Heather Humphreys. And then, so this week we had obviously Brian Ledden, the former Green TD in Limerick, who lost his seat at the last general election, along with 95% of the other parliamentary party. But anyway, so it's just Roderick O'Gorman, the leader, left there in the Dáil, saying effectively he resigned from the party over its decision to back Catherine Connolly. Said it was a mistake. We then had confirmation that Roisin Garvey, the former deputy party leader, had also stood down, and then we had also Pippa Hackett. No, sorry, was it Pauline O'Reilly? I believe was come out and say it was a mistake. Now, the context of all this, I should say, I think is, well, not the context, but if you look, just zoom out for a minute. 25 members of the Green Party, is my understanding, stood down. That's a membership of about 3,000. Like, that's pretty small. Yeah, okay, a former Green Party TD came out and said this, and that's fine. I don't think it's done either a huge amount of damage to the Green Party, and ultimately, while everyone expected the left vote to fracture and the left party, they haven't. They've held together pretty well between People for Profit, the Social Democrats, who've probably been, maybe along with Paul Murphy, Connolly's biggest supporters.
They were there from the outset.
Labour a little bit more mixed, like just looking through various TD social media channels. Some are very, out there, some not so much. But if they're saying they're not. If they're not saying it, in other words. So they have, look, I mean, the Green Party thing, I mean, I think it's a blip, to be perfectly honest with you. And ultimately, 7 days out now, and there seems to be cohesion, and I think that's to a certain extent what's got Connolly where she is. And I should obviously add Sinn Féin. I mean, I think there was a degree of cynicism when Mary Lou McDonald teased who they would be backing when she said it would be a game changer, and I think some people kind of snickered at that and went, yeah, we'll see.
look where we are now.
And it's my understanding that, in Vicar Street, is it on Sunday or Monday night, when Christy Moore and all them, I think party leaders from all of those parties will be there and putting on a united front. And the interesting thing, I think, will be, when this presidential election's over, what the united left front will look like in the Dáil for the next few years.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask about, because I want to know, I think it's easier for the left to get behind an individual person that isn't policy related. It's one person that they all respect and they all like, and they were able to get behind one person, one message, and get what we fully anticipate is, and according to the polls, get Catherine Connolly across the line and into the Rs. I think that's a more straightforward task on behalf of the left.
Certainly.
It's very different to try and form a government. So let's say they maintain this kind of left alliance throughout, and they don't kind of take as many pot shots at each other throughout the Dáil term. Do you think ultimately this is the beginning of a true left alliance? Or, because I would have some reservations on that we see how difficult it is during government formation talks, that it really comes down to the nitty gritty of policy. And, I was even looking back at what Ivana Bacik was saying about Sinn Féin and how they flip-flop on climate policies, for example. And
migration as well.
And migration. There are some fundamental differences that these parties have. But ultimately, they need Sinn Féin. The smaller parties need Sinn Féin, and Sinn Féin will need them. It's where they can see that commonality. And I just wonder, is that really where the left alliance might splinter?
Yeah, I think it could, but I think what will be interesting is what they'll set their face to is opposing government policy, and what they will then find eventually is common ground. So there could end up being, in a way, it's hypothetical, but there could end up being almost like an unwritten manifesto gathering over the next few years in the Dáil, based on those instances of agreement in opposition. So they can kind of, at the end of the 3 or 4 years, go, well, actually, we stood together and we opposed and we agreed on all of these points. There's the foundation. I do think there's massive fundamental points. I don't think there's a snowball chance in hell that they'll be thinking about that right now. But yeah, I think it's certainly the beginning of it. But, it's a long, long, long time. And ultimately what you always find, I think, is that, in the way that Sinn Féin aped a lot of government policy towards the end of the last coalition, and it completely backfired on them, you may see government eventually aping and cozying up to some opposition ideas gradually as the Dáil term goes on and that general election draws near. But I think we're way too far out from that. Let's get past this election, and actually then we might have a little break from elections, although if Catherine Connolly wins, we're facing
into a by-election. My God, I haven't even thought that far. I just want to get to the 25th of October.
I really thought, after this election, okay, so we had the locals to the Europeans, we had the general, we had the presidential, and the by-election.
We're twitching at this stage.
I know. Oh well, look, sure.
Oh well. Circling back to Fine Gael just a little bit, where do you think the recriminations are going to come if Heather Humphreys doesn't get across the line? Because we spoke about, the Jim Gavin versus Billy Kelleher being a referendum on Micheál Martin's leadership. This might be a big reflection on Simon Harris's leadership. They really wanted to be the year that the Fine Gael won a presidential election, and it doesn't seem likely at this stage. When do you think they're going to start self-reflecting on the campaign?
Yeah, they've never won one, and as you say, at this point it looks like
they've missed their chance again.
The recriminations will start. Look, it's hard to know, because I think Fine Gael have a different way of operating to Fianna Fáil. I think Fianna Fáil tend to go straight to each other's throats more quickly, certainly in the past. And we saw that quite quickly against the leader during the Jim Gavin meltdown. I'm not convinced that this will go straight directed back at Simon Harris for a couple of reasons. My own sense of it, I think because Heather Humphreys has been quite a weak candidate. And
their second candidate as well, not their first choice, which I think is a get-out-of-jail-free card.
A bit of a get-out-of-jail-free card. And then also, they can say, well, she just didn't perhaps, resonate with the voters, and the Connolly camp did this, that and the other. Look, sure there'll be a diagnosis. I should say we shouldn't be talking like we're talking after the fact, but interestingly, there was a question put, I think it was to Pascal Donoghue, in the early days of the campaign, just after Heather had decided to go forward. I think it was put to Pascal by Anya Lawler around heading towards the budget. And she said, does Simon Harris need to stay out of Heather's way? and she was referencing, as you recall, the famous Kanturk incident, which was seen as kind of costing Fine Gael not the election, but certainly damaged them. And in many ways, Simon Harris has actually stayed out of the limelight.
Yeah.
He's been out now, I should say, the last few days, and he's been out campaigning with Heather Humphreys, but I think he's kept enough of a distance from the campaign, quite deliberately, and I'm sure he's very busy as well with other things. Martin Hayden is the Director of Elections, as we know, so, there'll be a bit of finger pointing, I'm sure, there. There's also this question, it seems, of whether Heather Humphreys has been getting around the country as much as she could.
Great point. She's been really focused around the northeast. The areas and the counties that I think that she would have had bigger success. I thought I was with her in Coot Hill, in her old school. I was going, why are we here?
Yeah.
So close to polling day. Surely it's down in Munster where they don't, where there's huge room there for gaining votes, and they're even getting over to Galway and just trying and seeing. There was very little of that, and actually she did get asked that question today. She said, I've been in Cork and I've been in Kerry, I've been in Limerick, a little bit here. She was able to name them on one hand.
She was president of the North East. But interestingly as well, what I think has been, how much she's been in Dublin.
Yes.
Dublin.
We knew she had a Dublin problem, though. We've known that since the Indo poll.
We've known that, but also that was also going to be a key battleground between her and Jim Gavin.
True.
Right? So it seems focusing on there still so much in the last few days as we're heading to the last week, I'm not sure. Look, I think we just caveat all of this with saying, we're still 7 or 8 days out from polling. If that gap closes, and let's say that it's not a complete landslide for Catherine Connolly, the recriminations will probably be significantly less, but they will happen nonetheless. Yeah,
talking about Simon Harris getting out of Heather Humphreys' way, very briefly, this motion of no confidence that became a motion of confidence in Simon Harris. Just briefly run us through what happened. I was in Cavan when it happened in the Dáil. So how did it go down? What were the pot shots taken? What were the kind of political analysis that you can give me after?
Yeah, I mean, you could survive comfortably. Aontú had put forward this no confidence motion. Next week, the government then... It was interesting because Aontú put it down. It was 11 or 12 o'clock on, was it Tuesday, in the Plinth Leinster House. Immediately within an hour, you had a spokesperson, Simon Harris, saying the government will deal with this matter swiftly. Yeah. Within the next hour, you had Simon Harris saying we will do... Anyway, look, there were lots of contributions. The main focus, and I think really will just be on not just Simon Harris's legacy in health, but will be on disability and spina bifida. The government, we know, has ordered this inquiry, etc., etc. There'll be reviews, etc., etc. Still 225 children on waiting lists. It was fodder for the opposition. The news will move on. It will come back again.
Okay, finally.
Fianna
Fáil. We were talking much, the drama of it all. We had the PP last week, and that's when everybody was able to speak from the heart, get whatever anger or emotion they had off their chest. But now this week, at the last PP on Wednesday, there was an announcement, or more detail we got in relation to this internal review. So who's heading it up? Who's involved? Do we know anything yet, detail-wise?
Yeah, so it's pretty broad strokes. So Barrister Kieran O'Loughlin will oversee it, and Tom Brabson, the TD, Eamon Scanlon, the TD, and Senator Margaret Murphy O'Mahony will be involved in it as well. And the couple of things that it's going to look at will be what was the selection process in general, and then what was the selection process and vetting process around Jim Gavin. Those are kind of the two main things they want to know. It's due to report back, I believe, within 4 weeks. And one of the things I think everyone will also be looking out for, which Pat the Cope Gallagher has insisted, is that the cost outlay from the Fianna Fáil party into Jim Gavin campaign is included in that final report. It'll be 4 weeks. Look, I mean, the sense I got from a few Fianna Fáil TDs yesterday and today was, everything, that the heat's been taken out of this. But, this will be an important moment for Micheál Martin and the party moving ahead, because ultimately, by the next time they choose a candidate to run for the presidency, it's very unlikely Micheál Martin will be Taoiseach. He may be going for the Áras himself, and whoever's in charge and those other younger new TDs will want a different process, and that is what this has started effectively.
I think we'll leave it there for this week. Cónal, thank you so much for joining me. I'm Tabitha Monahan, and thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Indo Politics. And remember, you can follow all the latest updates and our coverage of presidential election 2025 on the Irish Independent.